Are we live?
We're live.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm at the link and I don't see it, but
Chad, are we okay to go?
what, your personal Facebook?
my house is way too quiet right now. I'm making me nervous.
Look behind you.
If you don't smell smoke, I think you're okay.
Oh my gosh.
You posted it on your page, Chad?
On the Crossroads page, Eric.
Right, I don't see it. I see the Fairfield Town Council meeting.
There's the Charter Commission.
I mean, at the very least, we can all share it, even if we can't get it up on the city page. There it is. And it's working. I'm going to share it on my page if anyone wants to look for it.
Okay. We're going to start with the health and welfare budget. Denise Murray, the
Do we,
director.
do we have to do the Pledge of Allegiance and stuff, or we just dive right in?
Well, it's a budget meeting.
Okay,
I don't think we've ever started a budget meeting that way.
okay.
Right. So on page 19 in your book is the health and welfare. And the first page, the health and welfare budget consists of two pieces. One is the administrative page, and the second sheet in the budget is the listing of all the things that come under general assistance expenditures: housing, food, electricity, and so on. So on the first page, if you go right down to the bottom, you can see that this is under budget. The budget for next year is proposed at $1,800 less than the current year, which is a little bit more than a 1% decrease. Pretty much all of that is in the salary block at the very top of the budget page. You know, for those of you who've been on the council for a while, health and welfare has always had 3 people. We're down to 2, and we have budgeted a half-time position. That's a key position because for a long time now, I would say 15 years anyway, the department has had one person that can fill in any other city department that has a missing person because of sickness, vacation, whatever. So that person, that third person in GA, oftentimes migrates up here to the finance office, city clerk, can end up at the fire station, can end up at Public Works, filling in for people that are gone. But we think that we can navigate the next year with a 20-hour position instead of a full-time third position. So that's a decrease in that first block. The next block is the salary, benefits, everything associated with personnel. And then the last block on that first page is the operations, and you can see there are very, very few changes there. So Denise and I are ready. If you have any questions on page 1.
Mike, we don't anticipate with everything that's happening now, there being a need for additional resources or anything once we start coming out of this, or people aren't reaching out now for things at this point?
That is a good question. And when we talk, Denise and I, about next year and that 20-hour-a-week position, at first we thought, well, are we going to need it? And I think your point is that, yes, we definitely need to budget for that part-time third person in the event that this economic, well, I don't want to call it collapse, but anyway, uncertain economic times can contribute to a lot more of that help. Do you agree, Denise?
Yes, definitely. We've had a lot of extra work, especially we've taken notice of that. Looking for additional help along the way here, but we were able to get by during this pandemic so far. But we've been very, very busy.
Has it slowed down since the first 2 weeks?
A little bit, but we're still getting, and I'm hoping that as we progress here and the stimulus money comes in and unemployment starts to take off, people start to get their money, that's going to relax even more, because they'll be getting their own money to be able to support some of their needs.
Claude?
Are you anticipating then that that later in the fall, as things start to return to normal, is that what you're basing your budget projections on, or is it possible that we may need more help in the health and welfare if things don't improve as fast as we'd like them?
Well, I think with the part-time position in this next budget, we'll be able to get a part-time person. But as far as the money part of it, what's budgeted right now, we budgeted based on not knowing about a pandemic. So,
Denise, are you talking about page 2 now?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Really, a
Yeah.
lot of extra expenses would come in on page 2, not
right.
on page
Yes,
1.
that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. So Denise is right. We prepared this back in February. So do we know what housing expenses are going to be like, or food or other? It's just so hard to tell right now.
And some of that stuff we get reimbursed for, right, Mike? Isn't that what, there's a revenue line for this department, isn't there?
Right. We're going to go to that when we get done. It's 70% now, Denise?
70%, yes, from the state. Yeah.
Sure.
How fast do we get reimbursed on that?
Oh, that's a good question. I believe we are reimbursed so far up to the month of December.
Okay, so we're going to carry the load for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, we're looking, a good 3 months. They're behind.
Okay.
And I asked that question to the lady that does the reimbursements, and she could not give me any definitive answer as to when we'd get reimbursed. So.
Okay. And you're certain that you're going to be able to carry the load as this thing progresses, because we're not at the end of this, and some of the things I hear on the ground are that checks aren't coming in. They've been without checks for a month now.
You
This
can't get through
this
them.
will get worse before it gets better. So are you going to be able to carry the load with these numbers?
With the, are you talking about the personnel?
all over personnel and I mean, I realize you made your budget in February, but
Well,
any type of projections to go around that?
can I just pipe in a little bit here? The reality is we only have so much staff. We're not hiring extra people to deal with this. Our staff, Denise and her staff, they're gonna deal with things as much as they can. Their caseload's only gonna be so much. Because they're not gonna be open 24 hours a day. We're not adding extra staff for this. So we
I didn't say that.
we are not the backstop for a
I didn't say
pandemic.
that, Nick. I'm just
No,
asking.
I'm just trying to
that's all.
I'm just trying to put a little sauce on this to say, we're not going to be the backstop on a pandemic. So I don't think we should really blow up our numbers too much because it's just not. I mean, that's not the role of the municipal government. Eric.
Well, Denise, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what you guys do is first try to direct people to other resources, right, before we start spending the city's money.
Oh, I mean, certainly. I mean, when we're determining eligibility, we are looking at the whole picture. You know, if a person is eligible, I mean, we're going to help them. But we also, yes, refer them to all kinds of other resources in the community and with the state of Maine. Yeah, I mean, we're going to be, you know, as fiscally responsible as we can be when we're making decisions and trying to find those other resources.
And when you look at I think it's page 3 of the revenue, right at the very front of your book. No, I'm sorry, it's page 1.
First page, yeah.
Yep. You'll see a little bit more than halfway down the page, there's a state welfare reimbursement, and the amount projected for next year, 43,400, is that state reimbursement that we get, albeit sometimes late, but that's the 70% level, the 43,400, and then also right below it, you'll see a $5,000 miscellaneous revenue. At times, we're able to collect from people whom we've helped, and they later receive Social Security or something else, and we get them to sign something. Is that right, Denise? That they sign something saying if they do get benefits, they reimburse us to a certain extent?
Yes, that's correct. On SSI, if people have a, you know, they're getting assistance for a longer period of time and they eventually get SSI, we get paid retro for all the assistance that we assisted while they were waiting for their SSI to come through.
So if you look at your budget sheet and you look right back to the very first column, the actual for 2017-18, $13,000. That was probably a year when we did get reimbursed that way, Denise, do you think?
13,000, you mean for the miscellaneous?
Yep.
Way back to 2017-18?
Yep.
Yes, we probably had some larger SSI reimbursements with that amount of money. And then as like, if you look at 2019, we've only received $1,141. That's probably just some very small ones that came in, but generally, you know, it takes such a long time to get the SSI that we never know. It's hard to project what we're going to get, so.
Other questions for Denise? We good? Sydney?
Yeah, Denise, just want to let you know that historically your department has always been very prudent with your budget. I am in agreement with the mayor. I don't think we have to add anything extraordinary to this, even with the pandemic. I think as a municipality, I'm in agreement that we are not an end all for everything, but we definitely still have a very viable agency. And I think the budget looks very good, very well. And historically, you have done a great job as far as out of the department. So I recognize you for that.
Thank you. And I think that with, as far as the personnel with the part-time person in there, I mean, we haven't really, gone any further with that right now. The part-time person left in March and this thing happened. So we haven't hired for that. But I think if we have that extra third, budgeted person that has always been there, I mean, albeit part-time, we should be okay, even if we're continuing to work in this pandemic going forward for the next few months after the fiscal year starts.
Denise, thank you.
Okay, you're
You're
welcome.
free- Yep, you're free to sign off whenever you'd like.
All right, have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
And in our planning department's budget is up next, page 31 in your book. Not a whole lot to see here. Anne manages her work with the planning board so very well. And we're lucky to have that continuity with that board, with a changing membership that she's had over 20, help me out,
31 years.
31 years.
Mike always has to bring that up.
I had no childhood.
Are there any questions? And we had budgeted in the revenue side of things, I think on page 3, a $10,000 amount for planning. Like you said earlier, it's so hard to know if we're going to get plans submitted. So what actually is that revenue comprised of?
Oh, we charge for site plan review and subdivision review. So the larger the project, the more income we have, because it's based on the number of square feet or the number of apartments or number of lots.
So the conversion of the Lockwood Mills, if they go through with that in 2020,
Oh, they
could be,
already paid us. Well, the second phase,
of
we
course.
haven't reviewed the second phase of it, but we charge based on the number of units, yeah, for that. Because that's conversion of a commercial building to apartments.
Oh, okay.
So we don't charge for the number of square feet in that because the square feet are existing. That makes sense.
Does.
Questions? Sid?
The updated version that we got on the email through planning budget with training and conferences of $9,000 more. Can that be explained?
No, that's not my budget. I don't have any training in mine.
Okay.
Only one page of that is actually her budget. Sydney. Looks like the police department's budget was included in that file. For
The one that came in the email was 14 pages long. Labeled planning, unless that's a mistake.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
Only the
no,
one
I
page.
have half a page.
Yeah. The rest
Is
of it
that,
is other departments.
Okay.
all right, sorry about that. Was that the one that was sent just as a one?
Yeah, it was Sarah Bowen sent that out.
Yeah. But it has the police department and a bunch of departments in
That
there.
explains it.
Okay, all right, thank you. Ann, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Hey,
Bye.
Dan, you're tuning in from Vassalboro?
Yes, I'm right here.
All right.
Where's the guitar, Dan?
It's in the back room there.
Now, if you look at Dan's budget, which is on page 14 in your book, you'll see there's a almost 11% decrease over current year. I always want to say last year, but it's the current year. And that's entirely due to the part-time position, which has been budgeted. We haven't followed through with filling that. Dan, Dan, of course, can explain it for himself, but feels that with the workload, he's been able to accommodate that. And you're comfortable, Dan, going forward as a one-person department again?
As things stand now, yeah, I am. Allison and I have kind of been working on our division of labor, who does what, and that's helped a lot. She's helping more with some of the clerical and scheduling side of things, which frees me up to deal more with reviewing plans and checking out properties for various types of inspections. So it's gone well. Yeah, I don't think another part-time person is gonna make any difference, really.
Okay.
And Mike, I just think it's important when we look at, whenever we look at code enforcement, that we look at their revenue line as well. This is one of those departments.
Yeah, it's page 3, folks. Thank you, Nick. Page
Yeah.
3.
Towards the bottom, you see is 195,000 in estimated income. We're projecting 163 this year. So this is a department that more than pays for itself.
More than pays for itself.
As long as we have construction.
Just like,
What's
We
that?
provide value.
But as long as we have substantial construction projects going on, it pays for itself.
Right.
Or marijuana comes our way.
That too.
Do you feel, Dan, for this current year, are we pretty much on target with what we had budgeted for this current year? Pretty close?
We're pretty close. We've gone a little bit over as far as electrical and plumbing permits go. I think we're going to be a hair under what I kind of predicted for building permits. We're going to come close, very close. But overall, it may be just a couple $1,000 difference in the overall picture of the revenues.
Have you noticed any slowdown in construction due to the general economic slowdown?
Not yet. It's generally slow this time of year anyway. It starts to ramp back up sort of early May, June, sort of the construction season. So I'll have a better idea next month. But it's been pretty normal, at least for the past 2 years that I've been here anyway, for this time of year.
Some of the big projects just continue no matter what. The athletic complex at Colby, the hotel, Wendy's, as you probably know of others too, Dan.
Oh yeah, there's a lot going on. Hannaford wants to do a fairly, $1.5 million renovation. There's a lot of smaller commercial renovations happening throughout the city. US Cellular over at Waterville Commons Drive. One of Bill Mitchell's properties is getting over on Penny Lane. Hanger Clinic is going in there. He's got another, I think, a physical therapy place going in. We've got a lot happening with the Colby Arts Center and the Collaborative Building. The Dupreys have their buildings on Main Street. The Lockwood, the Seton Rehab, potentially. There's still a lot of good-sized projects that we've been talking about that I anticipate starting this year. Some of them may not be until the tail end of the year.
Any other questions on code enforcement for Dan? If not, Dan, thank you.
Hang on, Sid has a question.
Go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that's exactly what we want, Dan, is that kind of economic prosperity going on, even during these trying times, because if you're busy, we're happy. And I'll tell you, it's, I have to commend you too for the stance you're taking on on not needing an extra part-time person and going in with a lean budget beforehand and doing the things that you're doing. I know that I've had contact with you in my ward, and the access that I've had to you and the feedback that you come back very it's commendable. I mean, I gotta give you credit for what you do.
Thank you.
So very good relationship here with our code enforcement and a lean budget, and we still have all of these smaller, medium, even large, commercial type things going on in Waterville. We ought to be very proud of that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, another person that's directly involved in a lot of the stuff that's going on is Andy McPherson. Andy's in the economic development budget. Now, some of you might ask why the city engineer is in the economic development budget. There's a couple of reasons. One, of course, city engineer is instrumental in so much of the economic development that goes on. The other reason, which is not always obvious, is we finance this particular department, economic development, with all TIF money. And the use of TIF money is, I mean, the number one priority for the use of TIF money, according to the state, is for economic development purposes. And so that's why we've always titled this department Economic Development, is because our TIF money that we collect every year goes to pay for all of the expenses, not only the personnel and benefits, but if you're looking at page 15, the economic development budget, you'll see that there's a MIF expense, the Chamber of Commerce, Growth Council, First Park. So all of those are covered through the TIF fund. So actually, Andy's budget, if you look at the bottom line, has a decrease of 9,500 almost, about a 4% decrease. That's largely due to the fact that, fortunately for us, Andy didn't need to take advantage of health insurance through the city. You have it through your spouse, right? Right, Andy?
Correct.
So that was a big savings on our end. And I don't think there are any other surprises on salary or benefits anywhere in there, but certainly Andy and I are ready to answer any questions you might have. I told Andy I'm the one that probably is responsible for answering the questions on the bottom part of his budget with the different dues organizations that we support.
Mike, what's the time frame left on First Park before we, where are we with that?
First Park debt will be paid this November. We have to budget, well, actually the First Park Authority already approved the budget for 2021. So they're on the same fiscal year we are, July to June. So they approved the budget this month, March, for July 1, 20 to June 30, 21. By then the debt will be paid, but the question will remain at this time next year if Kennebec Regional Development Authority, First Park is a project within KRDA. The First Park Authority next March will determine on how to continue forward. There are 24 towns that are members, and there's a lot to it, which deserves probably a discussion all by itself in terms of the question of continuing. I'm glad you asked that because we do need to talk about this.
So this is it. We've made it.
No, not necessarily, no. No, because if the 24 member organization decides they want to continue with an executive director and a marketing and continuing to sell lots in First Park, for Waterville to get out or any other town to get out depends on a vote of the entire membership. We can't just say, oh, we're out, debt service paid, we're out of here.
It's like the mafia.
Well, and Mike and I had this discussion with them years ago about it being part of what the Growth Council does rather than being its own organization. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, I mean, I don't think over the years there's necessarily been great leadership up there, but
What is Waterville's dues compared? What are Waterville's dues compared to other towns?
Oh, well, we're by far the largest paying dues member.
Oh yeah,
because-
so I'm sure they're gonna all vote to let us out. You know what? We can-
Well, we're the biggest town.
listen, guys, listen. This is like for years. I've listened to the state. You know, we've had the state tell us to like bleep off this and that. You know, we're not paying you revenue sharing. At what point do we get a little backbone and say, you know what, we're done. We're going to make our own decisions about some of these things because we're not going to be beholden to a bunch of towns who aren't carrying the freight. We do that with our county tax, which we have no control over. We subsidize all these surrounding towns who don't have police and fire departments and want to come and use our stuff. So we should certainly start that discussion now and not wait. We should start now having that discussion as a city of what we want to be involved in and what we want to subsidize.
Mhm.
Eric?
Yes,
Mike, there is a revenue line for First Park too, right?
right. So our dues are, our revenues from First Park are about half what we pay in dues. So for those of you looking at the budget page, you'll see that our dues is 67,000. If you go to page 3, maybe, I'm guessing,
It's 49,000 is budgeted.
49 in revenue. So quite a bit more than half. Okay, and that's gone up every year. Now, this would be 20 years in 2020 that we've been a member. So we've got a lot of catching up to do in terms of what we've paid in dues. But here's the key thing, and Nick, we do need to talk about this a lot more. The city of Waterville, along with all the other 23 towns, have a 99-year revenue sharing agreement with Oakland, which means we will continue to receive revenues without having to contribute anything. We will continue to receive revenues from the town of Oakland through that revenue sharing agreement if we stay a member of the park.
But to stay a member though, can the other people demand that we keep forking over the lion's share of the money they need?
Right, when we come
Or
out,
can we just say we're not paying, but we're collecting revenues?
or
Yeah.
we're not paying and we don't even want the revenues. Would
Or-
we come ahead?
Well, remember,
Let
when
me ask you
the,
this: do we get a bigger vote than some people? Is this like a stock holding where we
yes,
have so we have a bigger vote?
yeah, we have 4 voting members. The next largest town has 2.
Okay.
Yeah, so we definitely have a proportionate share in voting.
Because we really, at this point, and I don't want to downplay the significance of the T-Mobile and the number of Waterville residents that have had jobs, good jobs there, good paying jobs there, and careers there. I'm not downplaying that at all. But we now, the city of Waterville has I believe, a moral obligation to the people of Waterville that goes far beyond my time in office and any of our time to recoup some money here,
Mhm.
to not just keep shelling out. You know, this economic development line is something I've tried to get down over the years, and we've done a good job. When I started, it was over 200,000, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
We're now down almost to 100,000, and I think we're getting more bang for our buck because of the Growth Council and having Garvin, and but so yeah, certainly a big conversation to be had. Eric, Henry.
I mean, like I said, this goes back to the last, when I was on the council before, and we tried to have the conversation with them because they were hiring a new executive director at the time. And we tried to convince them that it should just be part of what the Growth Council does. This organization does not need its own full-time employee. If anything has changed, I'd love to hear the current executive director justify why this needs a full-time person working on just First Park. I mean, I just feel like this could be part of what the Growth Council does. I'd rather give them an additional part-time staff member or a support person rather than paying 2 executive director salaries.
Yep. As you remember, I'm the one that fought for that same cause 4 years ago, and we weren't very successful. Sydney?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think this is, we've been batting this back and forth for a while now. And, you know, it seems like whoever takes charge up there as an executive director has minimal impact, and the economic activity out there outside of T-Mobile has been very minuscule. And certainly with us having the biggest stake in the game, I agree. I totally agree that this is something the Central Maine Growth Council would be more adept at reaping success up there if they were a part of this. You know, we certainly pay them good money, and they certainly we get a lot of bang for our buck, and we definitely have to have discussions on this, because I'm in total agreement that we have to have a complete revamp of what we're doing up there in First Park, because we've had such minuscule results.
Yeah, I agree, Sid. I mean, Garvin does a great job, and I think he could add a lot of life to that area, no doubt.
Well, and the thing is, he's already directing potential businesses up there anyway. Like,
Right.
I just think it's a duplication of services.
I felt that way at one time, but I don't feel that way anymore. But we do need to have a discussion just on that point. Rick, I'm sorry.
Did I understand we're only getting half back of what we're paying in?
It's more like 3/4, it looks like.
So we're losing money on this whole venture?
Well, we've
yeah.
been doing that for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what you all have to remember is this. Let me just give you one number.
Okay.
All right. Take the number 850 employees. Multiply that by 30,000 a year annual salary. That's your annual income coming into T-Mobile from out of state every year. Name one economic development project in Central Maine that even comes close to matching that. There isn't one. There isn't one. There isn't one that comes even close. So we're very disappointed that we've only sold 4 lots out of 20. But when you look at the economic impact of 850 times 30,000, multiply it out every year, that's huge.
Is that building for sale, Mike?
Is it for sale?
Yeah.
I don't think so. T-Mobile?
Well, their
Yeah.
merger just went through, right?
They merged with Sprint. That news just came out last week, I think.
Well, and the other thing I want to say about T-Mobile, you can't talk about T-Mobile without talking what the consequence was of that, which was that LL Bean took their call center out of town because there weren't enough employees for both call centers. So the net impact, and then all that really has happened is a lot of other businesses have been shuffled around from other places, either in Waterville or the surrounding communities, and moved up to First Park to make it look like something's going on up there.
I think with the T-Mobile, though, I mean, I don't know that Ella Bean ever would have put 850 people. I mean, I'm totally, that's why I said before, I don't want to minimize that. I just think now that we've paid, you don't subsidize business permanently. I mean, the federal government does that, but I don't think it's our job to do that.
It deserves a discussion all by itself.
Claude.
I want to thank the mayor for raising a question that jumped right out at me. And I definitely think that we should go over the issues here. However, I think we're doing the budget line tonight, and maybe we should move on to the next item on business.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Andy, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Andy.
Hope I didn't talk too much tonight again. Okay, thanks.
See.
Next year, he's going to be on his own.
All right, well, fire is next. Sean is here. I'm gonna need his help when you look at that first block with the salaries. A lot of moving pieces within that. Sean, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna ask you to help. One of the biggest, so you'll see in the salary block, a very, very substantial increase over current year. The first reason for that is that we didn't budget correctly last year, or we missed something. There was an error made in the budgeting on the first line, right, Sean, the salary line?
That is correct. It was a clerical issue that wasn't picked up by finance.
So that amount was $15,000?
Approximately, yep.
So I'm going to let Sean respond to any questions that you folks have in looking at the salary line. Are there two different overtime accounts there? They each mean something different. You're talking about people that work 24/7. So overtime, holiday pay, other things like that come into play where, of course, they won't on a regular department.
Yeah, Mike, I'm happy to give an overview as well, just real quick if you'd like.
Thank you.
So that first line, yes, last year there was a clerical issue. It was about $10,000 to $15,000 that wasn't picked up. So you can see that what we budgeted last year versus what I project, we're going to be over budget anyway. The other thing that occurred last year is we negotiated a contract after the budget was set. And as a result of negotiating after the budget was set, it has created essentially my entire line to be over budget. So what I had set for the budget versus what the council approved for contract is a bit different. So we can plan on this year's budget being over slightly. So when we look at next year's budget, we have to take those overages plus, an anticipated increase for the next contract as well. So that's why that number is, 6.67% versus 3%, what it should be. So if we drop down to the second line, when we adjust wages, we also have to adjust overtime wages, but that is primarily the $9,650 increase primarily covers the Colby class that we're putting on annually. Colby's reached out to us and said, look, we want you to come up here and teach our firefighters or teach our students to become firefighters for continuing education, and we'll pay you to do that. And in turn, the city trains essentially, provides free training for additional firefighters because they end up coming down here and joining. So and I hate to jump directly to the revenue line, but there's a $10,000 payment that we've reflected on the revenue line to help offset some of that cost of that overtime. The standard overtime is a line, they call it standard overtime because a firefighter works 48 hours the first week, 48 hours the second week, and 72 hours the third week. That is how we get 3 shifts, 24/7 coverage. So that third week, they get what's called standard overtime, or anything after 53 hours is paid at time and a half. So although it's called overtime, they're just working their regular shift, but we have a line for it that identifies that third week, everything beyond 53 hours. Holiday pay, that's just representative of the increase in the contractual obligation. The premium pay is just representative of, we used to pay a stipend and we paid that annually. And Mike, help me out, is it the Fair Labor Act?
Fair Labor Standards, yep.
Yeah, Fair Labor Standards Act said this can't be done, and we now have to pay hourly. So as a result of paying hourly, it's actually, which is my understanding, federal and state law, it's no longer just a stipend. It has to be calculated on each individual hour's worked. Well, we know that firefighters and police officers work a lot of hours. So that difference between 16, almost 17,000 and 22,000 is the extra hours these guys are working. And we can't get around that because that's, again, my understanding of federal and state law. The part-time wages, we saw another increase in minimum wage. So that will make up for minimum wage. And to be honest with you, it's really a educated guess as to how many calls will run, what is the use of the part-time staff. So it's really a guess. This year we'll actually come in under budget in that particular line. I want to be very clear. We'll be a little bit under budget, and the reason why is because this COVID issue has really slowed down our part-time response. They do a great job. There's no question about it. They're extremely dedicated here to the city, but a good example of why it slowed down is a third of my call force belongs to Colby College. That's where I pull a third of my call force to help with the provide fire and EMS response. The second they close their doors and ship the students home, I've now lost a third of my call force. So this year, although we'll be a little bit under budget, is not reflective of next year. And then the last bullet on there, and I'm happy to take any questions, just interrupt me, is we had said at one point in time we needed to do something about a city health officer. We've corrected that at this point, and I believe Mike has a solid plan. But what we found out with this COVID-19 issue is that the city really needed medical advice to help guide our agencies. And so not only fire, police, but the city as a whole to help us understand what we were dealing with. And back when we dealt with the Colby issue back in January, to be honest with you, as much as we've trained and prepared for all of this, we didn't have all the answers. And we required a physician to come down here and give us advice. And I happen to have a physician on my payroll who was being paid at $11 an hour. So that's extremely irresponsible if we're using him in the capacity of a medical consultant. And to have a resource like that on tap who has been guiding this agency for the last 4 weeks, almost every other day, we just felt that it belonged in this budget, and using our physician would be appropriate here. And we would like to probably change that from city health officer to really medical director, to give us some advice. And some of the benefits that I will receive out of that inadvertently will be guidance with my EMS program. He'll help with licensure, so on and so forth. The benefits are extreme for my agency.
So where is that in here? Just
It's the city health officer down the bottom.
Right at the top where all the salaries are.
oh, just okay.
Right under
Sorry.
temporary wages. Doesn't have a code because it's a new thing.
So this is just a part-time. This is just being handled as a part-time consultancy.
So yes. So what I would recommend to the city manager, and we haven't, really ironed this out because we don't know if it will be funded. It's up to you guys to determine whether it will be funded or not. But in the event that it is funded, I would recommend to the city manager that we enter into a contract with the medical director stating that he will provide this for a service at this amount of cost. So there's no increases to the city or any hidden fees that we're not aware of. And the physician will be, adequately compensated. If you divided $10,000 over 12 months, it's right around $800 a month. The average per diem ER physician is paid about $200 an hour. So that's representative of about 4 hours a month. And I will tell you right now that we probably get 10 to 18 hours a month out of our physician now. So I feel this is a bargain, something we definitely need to take advantage of. But I would yield back to Mike's recommendation.
No, I certainly don't have anything to add to that. I think it's a critical position, and we don't have anything better to prove that than what we've been through the last 3 weeks. Claude, I know you had a question.
Oh, we don't have anything formal with the physician at this point.
No.
So,
We-
so that's what you're looking for, is some authorization to go ahead and negotiate with him and put together a formal contract.
Right. As part of the budget approval, you know, if the budget approval, if this is part of the approved budget for fire, then we would come forward with that. So he's been working on a handshake arrangement with us during this time.
And just to answer that question, as far as a formal agreement, he is an employee of the city of Waterville at this point. He's hired onto the fire department as a part-time employee. So
Okay.
I do have a formal agreement. His formal agreement is $11 an hour.
Chief, are there any other new positions in this budget?
No, there are not.
I mean, I assume that by looking at the numbers, but I just wanted to verify.
Yep. Other than the medical director, I want to be very
Right.
clear that that would be considered a new part-time position.
Would this be something where more, because are we going to pay this person regardless of whether we take their advice or not? I realize it's not a big number, but my thing is, like, how many years have we not had to have somebody's advice? I mean, I don't want to act like we're going to be in perpetual pandemic mode either.
No, I don't think that this is, I mean, obviously we've seen the advantage of having a physician available to us during this
Okay.
pandemic. But I will tell you that nearly every fire department in the state has an employed medical director as a result of the EMS program. So anything that I do here, EMS wise, I have to consult with a medical doctor anyway. We've been very lucky to have Dr. Pay essentially volunteer his services. I know $11 an hour or $12 an hour now is not really adequate, but this is a normal position for a fire department, which is why it fit here versus somewhere else in the city.
So this could something that you would be able to benefit from even with your normal state of affairs.
That is correct. So
Thanks.
as it stands right now with our backup ambulance program, every call that's transported will be reviewed by Dr. Pay, every single one of them. And we are not going to move forward with low quality care. Everything is going to be monitored by a physician, whether it is approved or not. By securing him via a contract, I know that at 2 o'clock in the morning, if I have a provider that's been exposed to meningococcal meningitis, that I have somebody I can call and say, hey, can you help me with this particular employee or with this particular circumstance? So yes, I will see benefits out of this regularly. The other thing that Dr. Pay provides for both Waterville, Winslow, and the region is hands-on training, and he often will ride on our rescue to oversee care. And again, he's done this on almost a volunteer basis at this time. So I would see extreme benefit from this.
Okay.
Especially with the ambulance service. I mean, it was really the ambulance part of the EMS service that made this position critical. Am I correct on that, Sean?
Yes and no. This is not if you ask me, is this $10,000 reflective because we purchase ambulances? I would say a portion of it is, yes, but not all of it. We've had a medical director for 20
Please don't
years.
put him in the paper for that tomorrow.
Yeah, we've had a medical director for 20 years. The difference between tomorrow's medical director and yesterday's medical director is we'll see some involvement. And that's what is critical on delivering high quality EMS services to the community. So I'm big on EMS. It's 70% of our job, and I want to do what's right for the community. And there's no better way than to have physician oversight.
Claude, I see your hand.
Is your salary and overtime, is that based on, are you projecting that based on what you're looking at in terms of your collective bargaining negotiations?
Mike, can I answer that question? Okay, so what we factored in is a 3% increase or suspected increase. However, we will be bargaining here in the near future, and that will be determined through contract negotiations.
Rick?
Chief, can you give me a point of clarity on the part-time temporary wages as is concerned to the Colby issue that you brought up? I want some clarity there.
Specifically,
you'd said that there was a third of that was dropped when Colby went home. Can you give me, is that this year alone? Is that year over year? I want some clarity there. I don't quite grasp what you're going at.
Oh, absolutely. So we have, off the top of my head, probably 5 or 6 Colby employees or Colby students that are employees on the fire department. We've provided them with firefighter 1 and 2 training, and most of them are actually EMTs. And so generally, when school is in session, we see a very good response from not only all of our call force, but the Colby students. So as a result of the college shutting down, sending the students home, we've lost 6 or 7 of our call force members. So we're not paying them to respond to calls today. Therefore, we're going to actually be less than what I budgeted for. And the other reason, of course, is this COVID issue. The council and the mayor and the city manager supported bringing in additional staff to handle this issue. And as a direct result of that, I have full-time staff line will be a little under.
Thanks, Chief. That cleared up. I had that totally different direction. So
no problem.
Thank
you. That's my job.
Sean, you've never run into issues with not having enough staff when those kids aren't here?
So the answer is we can generally prepare for it. As far as we know that they're going home in the summertime. So that's when our other part-time, our call firefighters, some of them with 30, 35 years on the department really step up and increase their response. A lot of times our Colby students will actually stay over the summer as well and help us and not go home. So we've never seen this big of a decrease that I'm aware of. Because it just hasn't happened, but with the situation, it's alarming. The other thing is, back in the fall, if you remember, I had a big hiring advertisement, and we tried to bring the staff up to 30, and we did that. And along the way, we obviously lost some went through the academy, some dropped out of the academy. We're trying to maintain 30, but it's an extremely difficult thing to do. Our highest paid person on our part-time force makes about $4,000 a pay period, which we have 2 pay periods a year. So that person could bring home $7,500. And with the pandemic, what is more important? Making $350 every 6 months or your full-time job? So the full-time jobs in the family, rightfully so, have taken priority in responding to, the potential of exposure for COVID has proved a bit difficult, which is why I asked for the additional staffing. And quite honestly, it's really paid off, and it's paid off in the forms of physically saving people's lives. I can tell you about 2 circumstances, 2 cardiac arrests where people, which I believe saved their life as a result of having additional staffing. So there's no question about it.
Sydney, did you have a question earlier?
No, Sean answered it. I was just looking for that magic number of, call force firefighters, and you said it's, you maintain around 30, Sean?
Yes, we used to have 60 on the call force. That dropped to 40 over the years. And now we try to maintain 30. And I believe the roster's right around 24 right now.
Okay.
And when the Colby students go away, take away 6, we're down to 18. And then you just talk about Monday through Friday. When everybody's working a regular job, that number cuts in half. It's our call force is extremely dedicated, some of the best in the business, and I'll put them up against any fire department out there. But the simple fact of the matter is, if you're not paid to do this job, it doesn't become an immediate priority. And that's why we've, really relied on our full-time staff to pull the weight.
On the rest of the budget, considering the increases in salaries and benefits, we tried to really, on the operations side, hold down costs as best we could. We have one advantage in that we are getting a new piece of equipment, newer pieces of equipment. Some things at the fire station are being repaired. So when you look at the operations part of the budget, which includes quite a few lines, maybe almost 20 lines or more, we've tried to limit increases within those accounts as much as we can. There is a new line right at the very end, the medical billing line. Sean, can you just explain that too for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do EMS, we're going to have a third-party billing company, and that billing company is going to bill the patient and then collect a portion of the revenue. In our backup model that we've proposed, doing maximum of 50 calls a year, they're going to take 8% of whatever they collect. That's a very, very, very small number. So we've estimated that at a maximum of 1,000 at 50 calls, and we'll see where that goes. But one of the questions I really wanted to drive home, with the exception of the medical director, which is not necessarily associated with this ambulance program, but it does benefit the ambulance program. I want to be very clear there. I've asked for $4,000 to support the backup ambulance program. So I had originally proposed about $11,000 in operating costs, but I've taken a look at the budget, and with the new equipment and the decisions that we've made to take some equipment offline, I believe the cost is actually going to be less. So functioning the backup ambulance program, the additional cost to my budget will be about $4,000, and that's reflected in the operations section of the budget.
Sean,
Yep.
I noticed the line for PPE hasn't changed. Do you think you should be budgeting more for that line given circumstances?
So with the current pandemic, the way it stands is all the PPE acquisitions will be run through the COVID line, or that 150,000 that was approved by the council with the manager's oversight. So I am not projecting any additional PPE out of regular operating budget.
So you don't think we should just build that into the budget moving forward? Because I think there's probably going to be a lot of changes in protocol about, you're going to be using a lot more PPE moving forward, even after this year, I would think.
That's really hard to say, and I mean, we would assume that we would see a little bit more, and I'm happy to raise that, of course. I just know that the COVID line or the money that you've already authorized has allowed us to have a stockpile here at the fire station that's going to last us a pretty long time. We do really well in stretching our EMS supplies budget. We've done it a long time. We have our partners like Inland Hospital and Maine General sell us items really, really cheap. So we've done really well. I just don't know what the future would bring. And to be quite honest with you, when we established this budget, we weren't even worried about COVID. So I think you brought up a valid point that we would certainly entertain increasing.
Rick, did you have a question?
Well, I do, but it's around revenues. You're gonna show revenues next year, correct, John?
With
ambulance.
Yeah, so the revenue well, go ahead.
That's not where I'm going with that. I'm thinking out loud here. So, and you're asking for a $4,000 increase. I'm trying to quell the increase of the ambulance that we're going to see on this year's budget.
Yep.
So for the revenues next year, that $4,000 will make that $4,000 back.
No question.
Okay. I want that said, because when we adopted, well, I wasn't part of it, but when the ambulances were adopted, it was going to be zero cost to us as a city. And being on the fire department, on the fire committee, I know that you're going to make that money back. So I want that said, that this isn't exactly a $4,000 increase. We're just getting it in the pipeline so that we can make that money back.
Yeah, and if we,
That's
just for the purpose of this conversation, if we assume that after, bad debt, non-collectibles, we saw $300 a call. If we did 20 calls, that's $6,000. So 20 calls, we almost get 10 calls a day. Again, we're functioning in a backup capacity. That is what the council has instructed us to do. So if we see 20 calls, if we see 50 calls, it's going to be double that. So I'm confident that the operations budget will sustain this backup ambulance program at 50 calls a year. Anything beyond 50 calls, we're going to see an increase, but we're also going to see an increase in revenue.
Thank you, Chief.
Sid?
Yeah, Chief, I just want to tell you that after having conversations a few times with you, and as far as the backup ambulance is concerned, I believe in what you're saying 110%. I think it is going to make revenue. I think it is a worthy operation. I think we are on the same level, and this revenue that's going to come in from that, even in a backup mode, is going to be beneficial to the city. So I do believe that the minor investment of $4,000 is going to come back more so than in dividends like you can't believe. So I totally think you are arming yourself with the best of your abilities, and you're doing a fantastic job over there.
Well, we certainly appreciate it, and that's in the hard work that our employees are putting in. The fire department's really taken a lot of pride in these ambulances, a lot of pride. The full-time staff believes in this. I believe in this. As I said before, I believe that it was the right move for the city of Waterville. I stand behind that, and when we can contribute to somebody's quality of life as a result of having these ambulances, I'll be able to stand up and say, see, I told you so. But to be quite honest with you, when we entered this pandemic, I could honestly look at the city manager and the council and say, this fire department has never been more prepared to help provide critical services to the community than we have been. So we are fully functional, ready to support Delta in any capacity that they may need, but we haven't even got our second truck yet. So I don't want to project any revenue, until next fiscal year, which is what we're doing.
Understandable.
So
Now, the revenues we've been talking about are on page 3 of your book. And they're right in the middle of the page. If you want to take a quick look at those, and Sean, can you just describe each miscellaneous? Well, that is what it is. But a couple of new ones here.
yeah, so the miscellaneous revenue was kind of, we really only had a couple lines in our revenue. Miscellaneous was kind of the catch-all. So you can see that next year we've adjusted that a little bit. That's because we've broken out into each line. The Colby College has affirmed to us that they want to continue with the firefighter program, which is why I've entered the $10,000 figure into that spreadsheet as well. Cost recovery. Up until COVID-19, I would have probably predicted in between $1,000 and $2,000 a month that we would see from cost recovery. To be honest with you, we have $3,210 in just the last couple months, and I'm probably going to see in between $3,000 and $5,000 that hasn't been paid yet. So cost recovery has been extremely good for the citizens of Waterville, especially when we are having people from outside the community come into Waterville, require fire department services. Now, for the first time, we're recouping even a little bit of that money that the fire department or essentially the taxpayers has spent to provide that service. It's a little bit of money, but I just wanted to stay conservative and project 8,000 for next year. I think it will be more than that, but I just don't have enough experience with it to give you a solid number. And then EMS revenue, I've projected at $5,000. And that was, if you took 20 calls times that by 300, that gives you $6,000. So I don't want to overestimate and then fall short. I would rather underestimate and then do more than that. So overall, the city manager is presenting 16,000 in additional revenue compared to last year.
And that's a conservative approach, right, Sean?
I think that's extremely conservative. And, I know I've said it a dozen times, but that's the ambulance in backup mode. That's waiting and just being available when it's only necessary. The numbers change drastically when we want to take a step into EMS. But again, we yield back to the wishes of, our community. That's number one to me. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone in charge?
I know. I guess so, yeah.
Well, there's a quiet minute, Sean. I don't know what things look like over at the fire department right now, but I'm thinking we should resurrect the fire study committee soon to discuss what's going on in Winslow and how that's going to impact things.
Yep. I agree. I can definitely get on that. I know that we've been extremely busy the last few weeks. We were hoping to see this COVID issue peak out either this week, next week. We'd really like to do an assessment next week to determine, our needs up here, and then go from there. But is Mike with us? Mike, are you there?
I think he just left.
Okay. I'll talk to Mike about it, and if he wants me to proceed forward with that, I'll get it back on the docket. Well, even if we have to meet via Zoom.
I don't want to take you away from the EOC, but if if things slow down enough that you've got the time to to get back into that stuff.
Yep.
That was great.
No, absolutely. I know Mike was going to bridge into the memo that I put together at some point. I don't know if that's appropriate to do now. I kind of hope
Mike's not here, go ahead.
Mike,
Well,
Mike texted me to just say that his screen has frozen and he doesn't have audio either. So now's the time to do business.
No. That is not the time to do business. But so basically, when I had private, or I shouldn't say private, when I had independent conversations with all of the council, with the city manager, and of course, the mayor, we said we were going to have a conversation on staffing. And I understand the economic impacts of the community. And Mike has assured me my job is to determine the needs of the fire department, present those needs to you, and you determine whether to fund them or not, essentially. So I put together a very brief memo just outlining some of the potential staffing costs that we could, or options that we have here at the fire department to add staffing. At the end of the day, my agency is getting busier. We can't debate that whatsoever. And every day that we move forward, we somehow gain another responsibility. And what I mean by, and I'm not complaining at all, because that's our job. Our job is public safety. But the physical calls themselves are increasing. The building inspections are increasing. The amount of attention that fire code violations, fire suppression, fire prevention, and emergency medical services here in the city is requiring is just simply increasing. And I know Chief LaFountain has mentioned a few times that we're functioning at maximum capacity. Well, we're functioning beyond maximum capacity. And thankfully, in the last 3 weeks, I've had a little extra staff here, and it's been tremendous. It truly has made a significant difference. We've been able to get projects done. We've been able to clean our station adequately. And we've been able to respond in a more professional manner than we ever have before. And a good example of that was our 54 calls that we went on the last snowstorm. We did not call anyone to help us. We handled it all here in-house with the personnel that we had, 54 calls in less than 24 hours. And that's significant. So even one additional position would be a significant help for us. But my goal as the fire chief, just to be very clear, is to get back to where we were in 1993. That is where I would like to be. And in 1993, we had 7 firefighters per shift. And my understanding was they had an assistant chief as well. I understand that we're not going to do that today. I understand we might not be able to do that tomorrow, but that is a progressive goal of mine. My department, when we talk about adding that amount of staff, you ask, how do we pay for that? And fire departments across the state of Maine have paid for that through EMS transport. It's a known fact. It is what it is, but I respect the wishes of the council. So all I've done is put the expenditures on this memo. And basically, one career firefighter, $96,000. They would work 45 hours per week, and they work Monday through Friday. So Monday through Friday is where I need the staffing the most, because that is when my call force is unavailable, and that's when our calls significantly increase during business hours. So if you gave me one person and you asked me, Chief, where's the best place to apply this person, it would be Monday through Friday during the day. That's peak call volume and very little response from our call force. They're just working on the jobs. It's not their fault. The other option is per diem. One per diem firefighter paramedic slot The advantage to a per diem is we stretch the amount of hours available for that person. The disadvantage is it takes multiple people to fill that slot. My first choice would be hiring career. My second choice would be per diem, but firefighters don't generally like to work Monday through Friday. So we may have some difficulty if we were to try to hire a career firefighter paramedic. They just like shift work. That's why they join the fire department, because we work shift work. So if we went the per diem route, I would want to make some kind of, and I know this is hard to do, but some kind of commitment that this would be a stepping stone, for full-time staffing. So our union maintains, security. So they accept this, plan that we was to put forth. And of course, the best options, but the more costly options are hiring 3 firefighters, which would be 1 per shift, which is very similar to what the town of Winslow did. And the best option, but obviously the most costly option, would be 2 firefighters per shift, which would get us back to the same staffing level we had in 1993, where we did half the calls. So that's just a beginning of a discussion, and I understand we're coming. There's uncertain times ahead of us, but at some point we've got to understand that we're beyond maximum capacity, and we need help. We've seen 7 positions that were eliminated from our agency. I understand there are a lot of other agencies as well that need staffing. Mine is half of Public Works and half of the police department. I don't have any Monday through Friday people here other than my executive assistant, so I'm kind of a one-man show, and any help would be appreciative. So that's happy to answer any questions.
Hey, Chief, I really do like this staffing option document. I appreciate the different options, that you could, you would certainly be of benefit. Can you do a similar line item for each of these and kind of just break out, I know we can all do simple math, but, you stated earlier in this conversation that, that other departments are paying for this from EMS services. So can you go and just say, okay, now if right now we're operating in the backup model, if we then, expanded this to this, it would cover this. To the next one, we can do the per diem. If we expanded to this, it would do this, and see, and just provide some sort of, background as to saying, like this looks like a big number. However, in doing this, it offsets the number, and we're whole, or we increase our force by 1 firefighter per shift, or the 2 firefighters per shift, or we can hire this 1 career firefighter, bump up our calls to X, and again, there would be no net increase to the city.
I'd be happy to do that, just so you have an idea right now while we're having this discussion. We do about 2,800 EMS calls, and we do another 1,900 fire calls. It should be right on that list there. 2,897 EMS calls we did in 2019. Fire calls, 835. If we did 1 call a day, and so 350 calls a year, and we average $300 per transport, that's $105,000 in revenue. That's just with 1 call a day. So we could pay for one of these, 1 full-time firefighter or 1 per diem firefighter with 1 call a day. And so the problem with that is the city has to make a commitment that we're going to start going forward with not a backup model, with a call sharing model. So if we did 2 calls a day, that's approximately 210,000, which we're doing about 10 calls a day on average now. So
Now, when you said,
Yeah,
just
basically.
Can I just interrupt a little bit here? Kind of like Claude said earlier about First Park, I think this is I think we're delving into a totally separate discussion beyond what we're here for tonight.
no, I agree. And I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying to provide context in the cost, can we show the benefit? Can we show the savings, or not the savings, but the funding for this? I mean, there is a funding option. This isn't just
Yes.
straight out of taxpayer pocket. And that's all I'm asking for. I'm not asking to have that discussion right now.
Okay.
Yep, I
Well,
can do
this
that.
goes to my earlier discussion about getting the fire study committee back together.
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
some of this discussion is at that level and then making a
Right.
recommendation from there. I mean, the real fact of the matter is we're not going to do the 3 career firefighters or the 6 career firefighters unless we decide we're going to really try to generate revenue off of our EMS program. And so we need to have that discussion, and probably at the committee level before we do it at a budget meeting.
Agree.
There's nothing in the budget that you're proposing the memo that we got from Mike just now. That's not in the next year's budget. Am I correct?
That is correct. So basically, we're here to, my understanding is that, Mike kind of gave to me was he told me put together a memo, explain the staffing options that we have available. And if we get a little further in the budget process and we determine that, yes, a position can be afforded to the fire department, we wanted to be prepared. So in the event that we had money available to allot to this resource, that we could do that.
That, go ahead, Nick.
I was gonna say, I think we're done.
Yep. Yep, I mean, that completes the departments that we had lined up for tonight. I look quickly at the items for your council meeting next week. It's only 1 or 2. So I might suggest that we possibly cover 1 or 2 department budgets next week, depending on how it looks.
Mike, can we put an item on the agenda about the trash at the mobile home parks?
Sure, we can do that. A discussion item.
It can be just a discussion item, or we can put it on as an item to vote on and just not, we don't necessarily have to vote on it next week.
Right.
But so
Right.
I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this. We've had a discussion about possibly having the mobile home parks put dumpsters out, like apartment buildings over 4 units have to relieve some of the workload for public works.
Why don't I put it on as a discussion item and we'll start there.
If I recollect, I think we had this discussion. I think we're ready to vote.
We might as well put it on to vote on because it's part of the budget, Mike. I mean, we're going to have to factor that into the public works budget if it's something we're going to do. So we might as well make a decision on that.
Okay.
So obviously we'd want the guy from the mobile home parks, I'm sure, is going to have something to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
How's school budget looking? Have you gotten any closer to having that in our hands? That's a rhetorical question. I already kind of know the answer.
I think it's very, very close. I think they finalize it next Monday night. That's my understanding. So I think they will be done when they meet one last time.
Next Monday being their first vote.
Yes.
So we won't have it for another 3 weeks.
Well, in the past, Rick, the tradition has been they take their first vote, present it to us, we approve it as part of our budget, then they take their final vote that confirms what we've given them.
Okay.
Okay.
We also might take a peek at that for the finance committee.
I suggested that to Mr. Haley the other day, that it might not be a bad idea before the school budget comes up for full discussion the finance committee have a chance to talk about it. So it's a good idea, Sydney, I agree. We good, everybody?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, all right, next Tuesday night, same time, same place.
Good night, everybody.
Alrighty. All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
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 Welcome back, Flavia.
I know.
Thank you.
Good.